Welcome back to Aging Boldfully. My name is Susan Rohrbach. If you joined us for prior episodes, you know that Aging Boldfully is about living fully and finding purpose, and what I like to refer to as our third chapter. Aging well involves many different elements, and we explore these through guests who are incredible members of our community. In our past shows, we've discussed physical health. Today, we are going to explore brain health and a concept known as neuroplasticity. We are so fortunate to have a Franklin resident who's an expert in neuroplasticity joining us today to explore this topic. Please join me in welcoming my guest, Dr. Kymberlee O'Brien.
Hi.
Hey, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm so excited that you're here.
Thank you.
I don't just say that to every guest. Well, maybe I say it to a lot of guests. I am honestly so excited because I'm so interested in this topic of brain health.
No, I love that.
So before we start, I want you to tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I am a psychophysiologist. So that's how I kind of started in my degree, which means you take a psychology degree and you think about everything biological about psychology. So everything that we feel, everything that we do, everything that we think has some neurobiological piece of it. So every emotion, you can see where that is in the brain, right? Every thought, every cognition. So I started with that and started measuring that as a researcher. So a lot of my background is really sort of the intersection of psychology and neurobiology. So technically my field is psychobiology, and then I did a postdoc in developmental psychobiology. So you kind of see how that all begins and the whole trajectory across a lifetime of those. Yeah.
So, you are a Franklin resident, right? So, but you're a recent Franklin resident, are you
Yes,
not?
yeah, about 4 years now.
Right, and I loved when you talked about moving to Franklin and how you felt at home, when you moved here.
Yeah. I mean, I remember first seeing my house and just spot on knew that I loved my house. And then one of the first things I did was I went to the farmer's market and just loved it. Loved that there seemed to be a real kindness to Franklin that felt authentic and rare. And I still very much feel that way. Like there's a real sense of community, and there's I think that rare sense of people really helping each other to help each other and not for a favor later. I think that's a real rare gift to have in a community. Yeah, I really love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny, I've lived here for many years and I felt the same way when I moved here.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted you to expound upon that a little bit.
Yeah.
So let's start talking about neuroplasticity in the sense that when I think of it in very general terms and how I think other people may think of it is that when you think of nutrition, right, you think of I'm going to eat well, I'm going to lose weight, it's going to be generally good for my body. And also in my physical health, if I strength train, it's good for my bones, good for my muscles, I'll be toned, everything's good. But we don't really think about brain health because I think in general we think there's nothing we can do about it. We get older, right? We get older, our brain doesn't function as well. If I don't know where my keys are, that's because I'm old. But I mean, I think with neuroplasticity it gives you hope because you realize that the brain is not a static structure.
Yeah.
So I want you to go into that a little bit more and describe neuroplasticity.
Yeah, so it's basically the opposite of everything that you just said. So the brain is not this static, stable thing that is complete and done. What we know about our brains is that they are continually changing and growing and making conformational changes and remodeling continually, even in this moment right now. Right? Even if you're learning something new, your brain is making space for that and making changes. And we see that up until 70s, 80s, and that's only the people that we have researched. So you can see that probably even later. So there's a couple of different types of neuroplasticity. So you can see structural changes where the actual neurons are shifting and moving and pruning. So we have to have some of them leave the brain and then some of them rebuilding. So we see those changes. And we also see compensatory changes where, say, you've had a mild injury. So some pieces can take over for other pieces and do a job that may not have been the original job of those neurons. So it's really infinite, and we still think if we had a mile of everything we know about neuroplasticity, we've probably only gone about 3 inches.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's really infinite.
Right. So I think that as we age, we put sort of limitations on ourselves, don't we?
Yep.
Based on what you just said. In our mind, we probably don't think that it's infinite. We probably feel like it's somewhat fixed.
Right.
So talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, so we know also that the way that we think about whether the brain is basically done being built really affects how neuroplasticity can happen. So we have appraisal processes, right? So if you look at optimism or pessimism, if you're optimistic about how your brain can change and grow, that is going to profoundly affect how your brain will grow and change, right? We see these downstream consequences. So if you're pessimistic and you have sort of a fixed mindset, that's going to also influence how much your brain can continue to learn. And these are biochemical processes. But if you're optimistic and you have what's called a growth mindset, that's also going to influence how much information you're going to allow into your life, how much you're going to allow that I can learn new things, right? So the optimistic appraisal process, he says, I can learn this. It might be in increments, and that's how we want to learn anyway, is I want to learn this new thing. I'm going to learn a little bit today. I'm going to practice that. I can feel that I'm learning something different. So the optimism appraisal, those really matter. And they become these reciprocal processes as well, because then you can see, I did learn this. So if you're learning, a new instrument, for example, then you come back after you practice, you can see, oh, it's a little bit easier. Again, it doesn't have to be a huge, big picture thing. It can be little increments, and that's, again, how the brain likes to learn anyway, right?
So I think about, for myself, the other day, I was out hiking with friends. And I was trying to recall one of my cats' names. I had 3 cats many years ago.
Yeah.
And I couldn't for the life of me generate the name of the second cat.
Yeah.
Okay. And I instantly started feeling panicked. So, I think there is a fear factor there that also limits you, especially, say, for instance, you have had someone in your, not that I have, in your family, like a parent who, let's say, has had a dementia, Alzheimer's disease, and you automatically start thinking that, oh my God, something's happening here.
Right.
So I think the other factor that we haven't talked about is the fear that you put on yourself when you can't recall a word or a name that you used to.
Yeah, so I think that there's different kinds of biases that we have about the brain, and we certainly have a bias toward memory and a real fear about losing memory. So we do have a general internalized bias toward aging. And so if you look at implicit association tests, you can see if we look at a younger face and we look at an older face, most people, even older adults, will have a preference for the younger face. And we've all internalized that. We've all internalized that as you get older, all of these things will either shrink or they will diminish or capacities will decline. And that is not true. Right? So we see, if you walk into a room and you forget why you walked in there, a 25-year-old will have that experience. So when we think about brain health, we also have to think about what are the biases toward aging that are really largely doing us a disservice, right? And when we think about, again, coming back to neuroplasticity, you think about how do we prevent and protect cells? Not necessarily stopping decline, because we can't really stop cell death. That is going to happen. But how can you protect your cells, and how can you prevent those cells? And you have to also acknowledge that fear is also not helping a person to take on new skills, right? So it's almost part of that appraisal process where you say, well, here I am, and this is what I've got, and it's all downhill from here, that we want to work with that first and say, let's try to change this appraisal first, and say, they're called the bridge statements. What can I learn today, or I am learning something today. And again, these don't have to be huge things, but if a person can shift that thinking a little bit, shift that internalized bias, right? There are so many great things about getting older, and I don't mean old age and like the image of old age, but there's so many great things. There's wisdom, there's the positive effects that we were talking about, how older adults don't really buy into negative, salient, they don't really pay attention to negative things anymore. I've been there, done that. I'm not going to do that anymore. I used to say yes all the time to things. I don't do that anymore. The wisdom effects, there's a whole literature on wisdom. The experiential effects. I mean, there is a wealth of experience being older. So there's this whole body of literature, again, that says there's all these wonderful things about getting older, and even loneliness. If you look at people who are lonely, die earlier. Like there's a greater mortality to loneliness. Older adults are not the loneliest age group. Sadly, the loneliest age group is 25 years old. That's pretty tragic. But we think it's the older adults that are the most, and it isn't at all. In fact, it's probably the most social group is the older, like you're hiking together. Right? So the seniors, like they're doing Tai Chi probably right now together,
Right, yeah. So what you're saying is there's this empirical bias that we all have.
Implicit, yeah.
I'm sorry, implicit.
Yeah.
That if, whether you're 20, it's sort of built in, no matter how old you are. So, you're in your 60s now. Now you look at yourself and that bias is still there. You had the bias when you were 20. An older person can't do X, Y, Z. So now you're 60 and now you're up there and you're also thinking, I can't do X, Y, Z.
Absolutely.
Now I can't do X, Y, Z.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's very, that's culturally bound as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So that's very resting.
I can remember when I was in my 20s, seeing an older person cross a road with a cane and seeing it as a deficit.
Yep.
But I have to say now, when I see an older person cross the road, I say to myself, wow, what courage does that person have to keep moving with the cane? So my perception of that certainly has changed. But I agree with you. I think we put limitations on ourselves that are built in over the course of time, and it's part of our culture as well.
Yeah, and it's also part of our ancient wiring. There's this thing called attributional bias, where we look at a person and we think that their quality of life is one thing when we really don't know. Right, so we still have these biases toward youth, thinking, oh, it looks very carefree, and it looks, one way, it looks very happy, and in reality, there's a lot of loneliness, there's a lot of anxiety, and that's not necessarily true of older populations. There's, again, that sense of self identity is after you're 40, you really know who you are. Self advocacy, what you're really good at. So there again are those biases that really need more reflection, I think, to think about and to break through as people get older.
So maybe rather than jumping to a conclusion, you have to be more open-minded to the to what could possibly be in terms of that person's life, as opposed to making a judgment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What about rumination? Because we did talk about that off camera, and I like that conversation.
Yeah. So rumination in which way?
Well, we were talking about putting those limitations on yourself. And the fear associated with, oh my God, I can't remember.
Yeah.
And I do remember her name. It took me quite a while, but I do remember her name.
In the middle of the night?
She was our troubled cat, so I'm surprised I didn't remember her name. But in any event, so when you're stuck in the, oh my God, I can't remember that, I can't pull it out. You do go into, you're panicked, and then there's that rumination that happens.
Okay, so here's the thing about rumination, because it's a negative rumination. we anchor more negative information easier than positive information. It's just the way the brain is built. So there are parts of the brain, in particular the amygdala and the default mode network. So there are two different things that are happening. But when we are reliving or repurposing and reliving, we're actually anchoring those negative things even more into our self-identity and into our long-term memory storage. So if something is negative, the amygdala sort of takes it, it takes an alert of that and says, hey, if this is negative and if this is scary, I need to pay more attention to it. So then it's already scanning for something negative, whether that's real or not, it doesn't matter. But the amygdala is going to take a scan for that. So if you're ruminating, you're actually building those neurons. You're building that brain architecture even more into your brain, right? And then the default mode network, which is very self-referential, is building that back into your self-identity. So the more you think, hey, I'm really afraid of this, okay, that's alerting the amygdala, and now you're saying, this is my identity as an older person, I can't do it. So then it becomes, really entwined in your identity, and it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy, because you're basically having, these things loop over again. So if there are things that you can break that loop and also take down the emotionality of it, and there are different, cognitive processes that you can do with that, take the emotionality out of something. I mean, I think the fear piece is a good place to start to, cognitive behavioral therapies very, very quickly, they will take an idea and think about it cognitively and say, what is actually the emotion of this? And where does it actually feel? What's the sensation? Not even putting on the emotional label, but to say, where do I feel? Okay, I feel this, I feel it in my throat, or I feel a tightness in my chest, or I feel, this sort of panic, like I'm losing my breath. So you take those signals and you say, now I'm just gonna breathe more. So you do the opposite of all right, I'm just gonna open my heart a little bit more. I'm gonna, stretch a little bit more. And if you open up those body signals a little bit more and loosen up the cognitive piece, it just gives the default mode network a place to update yourself, right?
So it's a structure in your brain that's sort of creating this reinforcement network that plays out, and you have to figure a way to sort of break that connection.
Yes. And you need a couple of different ways to do it. So, if you think about things like imposter syndrome, right, which is this really entrenched self-identity that, positive affirmations don't work because those pieces are very entrenched in the self-identity of being an imposter. So you have to come at it from different inputs into the brain. And it's the same thing with having identity as, I'm an older person and I'm done. My brain is done, which is just not true. It's just not true. Again, when we started off the conversation, the evidence of neuroplasticity going into our 80s, at least our 80s. And that just doesn't mean I can still walk. It means I can learn a new language. I can learn a different, playing an instrument. I can go dancing.
Right.
Right?
Right. But you're saying up to 80, but that's simply because it hasn't been researched beyond 80. Yeah.
And, it hasn't been researched objectively in terms of here's the funding and we're doing this in a controlled lab. But if you look at the centenarians, the populations of centenarians around the world, so these are people up into their 110. And they are healthy and happy and hale and, 110, 115. And they exist and they are, they've been documented. And we see what they do, and they're the things that we as researchers will say, these are the things that we're doing. They're free, they're modifiable, we could be doing them today. They're not out of reach,
Okay. So now that we've sort of given an overview, I'm sure there's a lot more you could speak to in terms of neuroplasticity. But it does prevent or delay progression of certain dementias or dementia, cognitive impairment.
Yes.
So what do you think? One thing I wanted to mention, but this isn't just for someone like you and me who's aging. this also plays a role with someone who's had a stroke.
Yes.
Or a brain injury.
Yes, absolutely.
Can you speak to that for just
Yes, absolutely. So this is actually probably more studied than a general healthy population, where we see these remodeling, really, that are largely unexpected. And there are numerous case studies, and where, you know, somebody has half of their hemisphere has to be surgically removed, and we see them largely live a life as if they have a full brain. So you see, for example, the motor cortex will take over for the other hemisphere completely. So we know that the right hemisphere controls the left side of the body, the left controls the right. So it would make sense that if you could lose one of your hemispheres, that you would only have one side of your body working. Not the case. So this one half hemisphere can take over the whole part of the other hemisphere. So you still have your contralateral movement. You can walk, you can sing, you can dance, right? You can do all these contralateral movements. That's profound. So if people have, you know, they lose a limb, well, very much so, you have all the brain compensating and taking over sensory motivation, the motor cortex takes over. You know, so you have the functional changes, compensatory changes taking over. So they look like miracles, but they're just the brain doing its thing, right? These are not things that we train the brain to do. It's just what the neurons do. You know, they go in place and they recruit, and they change what their job. So there may no longer be a motor neuron. They might now be a sensory neuron, or they might no longer be an auditory neuron. They might be a motor neuron. You know, that's very profound. And it's not that, again, that we don't train the brain to do this.
Yeah, it automatically adapts and compensates.
Yes, that's profound.
Yeah, it
Those
is,
case
absolutely.
studies are profound.
Right, and I don't think that we in general think about that, you know, the brain has that much flexibility to compensate for things like brain injuries or strokes, et cetera.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you know, concussions, we largely don't know what happens in concussion. Because you think, you know, your brain is this fragile piece of tissue. And if you get a concussion and you're hitting, you know, you don't just hit one area, you might hit another area and another area, you know, in your skull. Thank goodness we have thick skulls. But you're hitting areas we don't exactly know what the damage is. So these areas that are being recruited, you know, we don't exactly understand what got recruited, what actually changed, right? So it's pretty profound, and it's also, some of it is pretty still mysterious.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So, so let's talk about, I'm going to stick to three things. I'm sure you're going to have more than that. But three things an individual can do to promote neuroplasticity.
Yeah. So we know, I mean, exercise is number one. Absolute number one. So we know that it's primarily cardiovascular, but that doesn't have to be, you know, it doesn't have to be high intensity. We know that HIIT classes are good, HIIT exercises are good. Any kind of exercise, in particular anything that is cross-body exercise, so contralateral movement, anything that is, you know, these kinds of, you know, again, the cross hemispheres, so that we're using both sides of the hemispheres. It helps the corpus callosum continue to build architecture. So that's number one. Actually, we see the sociality piece is very important. So social isolation, we know, again, people die sooner if they don't have social connection, is very important. And then we see the dietary stuff is very important. Sleep, I know you said three, but sleep. So we used to think, you know, sleep was sort of what we did to consolidate our memories. Now we're seeing that sleep hygiene is really, really critical. Actually, I'm going to put sleep above nutrition first. So exercise, sociality, sleep. If you could have to, it's three top things. Yeah.
So, but, you know, with exercise, as you said, it doesn't have to be high intensity. You know, start off by moving, right?
Anything at all, yeah. Yeah.
But what about hydration? Because I think that's another thing that could be potentially beneficial. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think hydration I would almost put as like what keeps us alive, right? I mean, that almost seems more fundamental than just supporting brain health. I mean, sleep as well, right? So if you don't sleep and you're not hydrated, you will die. Like that, forget about your brain, right? So exercise is supporting what's there, and sociality is supporting what's there. But absolutely hydration, absolutely, yeah.
Well, getting back to sleep, I think sleep is a tough one. I think as you age, it's tougher to sleep, we could do a whole show on sleep.
Probably.
But, the more you hear about it, you realize how important it is getting to bed at a particular time, trying to get up at a particular time. I know sometimes I use earplugs because there's way too much happening in my bedroom, with my dog, at the very least, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, I think it's hard for some people to have regulated sleep. I know I do, and even though like getting rid of screen time too right before you go to bed, all of that stuff. So we got to have a long conversation about that.
Yeah.
But I don't think everyone really realizes how important and imperative it is to have regular sleep.
Absolutely, and sleep does one thing that I think most people don't realize is that we do have cell death. Every day. We have different types of cell death. Some are the good nicely packaged, then your immune system gets rid of it. And then we have other sort of explosive cell death. And then when you have my favorite term, cellular debris in the brain, which we have to get rid of. You don't want cellular debris. Sleep gets rid of that. So that's one of the main reasons why it's so good for us, is it gets rid of the cellular debris. Particularly if you were worried about Alzheimer's or mild cognitive impairment, you have to have your brain get cleaned out. In essence, yeah,
that's important.
Yeah.
So, what about nutrition and combining foods? Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. So this has been like a growing trend, and the idea. So the number one thing about food combinations is eating to reduce inflammation. Inflammation is the killer. Like number one, the worst thing for your brain is inflammation. And we largely live in an environment that enhances inflammation, right? So food combinations help to reduce inflammation, and they also make the good food that we're eating more available. It makes the nutritions more available, right? So if you're eating just a healthy fat like an avocado, so you can add something to that like a protein that is going to open up the nutrition even more. And the most famous one, of course, is the turmeric. Everybody knows turmeric is good for anti-inflammatory, but if you add a little bit of black pepper to that, the elements of black pepper are going to open that anti-inflammatory up about 2,000%. So that's profound. Right? So the idea about food combinations is that if you're already taking this good thing, add a little bit of a combination to open up that package so that your healthy gut bacteria can take in that nutrition even more so. So you see that 2,000% example. Others are very similar. Cinnamon is a big boost. We know fermented foods, right? Your gut bacteria, we now think of the gut bacteria as like the little brain, right? Very much involved in how you're feeling, your mood, your psychological state. And again, getting those nutritional things bioavailable to your bloodstream. So that's a whole...
So you're accentuating them.
Absolutely.
Basically what...
Accentuating, yes.
Yes, so when you combine them, it even makes them more powerful.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
beneficial to your body.
Yeah, so you can, if you're eating a spinach smoothie or spinach, add some citrus. That's going to boost, it's going to release the iron in the spinach.
And you talked about frozen pineapple.
Frozen pineapples. So, so if you're eating, cottage cheese, so the protein in cottage cheese, if you add a little bit of pineapple, again, that citrus is going to open up the proteins. So that's what it is. It's almost like packaging. So you can take, one piece of a nutritional and kind of unlock it with another piece.
I want to love cottage cheese, but I can't. I've tried.
There are so many things that are good.
Seriously tried cottage cheese. I can't do it.
There are other.
I don't know if it's a texture thing or what it is. But
yogurt and banana, same thing.
Yes.
Okay. There you go.
What about blueberries and yogurt?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, blueberries by themselves are fantastic, but if you add something else to them,
Does your golden retriever like blueberries?
My golden retriever will eat kale. He's a foodie.
So my golden retriever loves blueberries.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, she loves them. Okay, so let's just for a second talk about that the brain loves novelty.
Yes. Yes.
So let's talk for a second.
So, yeah. So if you can do anything, it's to do something new. The brain loves novelty. And the brain loves learning, right? That's the other thing about coming back to neuroplasticity. The brain loves to learn something new. And it loves a little cognitive challenge. So it doesn't have to be huge, learn a whole new thing. But if you give the brain a little bit of a challenge, what you're doing is you're adding a little bit of sympathetic nervous system activity. So rather than giving you, I don't know, an easy puzzle to do, your brains may not like that. Like, okay, I'll do this thing, but it might get boring. If I give you something a little more complicated, and your brain might even get a little frustrated, so now you're going to get a little bit of sympathetic nervous system activity, which is going to engage more brain activity, right? Which we want, more association areas to get active. That's what we want. So a little bit of challenge, a little bit of novelty. And here's the other thing, the brain doesn't really like change. So if you go hiking and you go hike the same route, do something different. Take a different route. Because your brain...
So you're making it uncomfortable.
A little bit uncomfortable.
A little bit
Not
uncomfortable.
hugely.
Yep.
Right? So I call it choosing your challenges. So even if that means, oh God, I hate public speaking, like, we'll go do a little public speaking. Or go, if you don't like meeting new people, we'll go make a new friend. Just do a little bit something. I'm not saying, go cut off people in the donkeys line. Right? Don't go that far.
Yeah, that would be a problem.
Don't do that. My undergrads have done that.
Oh.
But just a little bit of discomfort in a safe way, right? Or again, or go a different pathway, or eat a different food, right? Because what we want to do is continue to open up areas in the brain where they do have to interact with something new, something that has to be assimilated, something that has to be categorized, and all of that builds new brain architecture. And that's what we want for the rest of our lives. Just build a new brain architecture.
We were also talking earlier about, the fact that I started to learn the ukulele.
Yay,
Yeah,
ukulele.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
And what happens at the senior center? Because, then that led to a discussion of me saying, I also played drums
Yes.
in my elementary, junior high school years
Yeah.
in a marching band.
Yeah.
So, but then that led to you telling me something which is kind of cool.
Yeah. So drum circle at the senior center, but I was also saying drumming is one of the best things you could do for your brain. It's got everything, right? So drum circle at the seniors, it's free. Right, for if you're over 50. And this isn't just in Franklin, it's, I think other centers have it, but it gives you the contralateral movement because you're doing two different rhythms with your hands. You're getting blood flow, you're getting exercise, you are doing respiration, because I'm making you sing a little bit, it's social, we have a great time, we play, we tell stories while you're drumming, which you can't do, say your name. I can't say my name and drum at the same time. And it gives you what is called neural entrainment. So if I were to look at your brain right now with the EEG, we would see all of your brain waves maybe a little bit out of sync. Maybe not right now because we're conversing, but usually we see a little bit of out of sync. And what drumming does is it gets your brain to focus almost immediately, and we get neural entrainment, which is all the signal, and it feels great. So this is part of Csikszentmihalyi's Flow book, if you know that book. But what is lovely about this, and the brain loves this, is everything is pretty much in sync, and and brains love that. So in 1 hour, you get everything, and you get that challenge, right? So a little bit of challenge, and it gets the focus again almost immediately. You see people just focus down. So especially if you're somebody who feels like I have a bunch of multitasking, I have some things I'm worried about, like that rumination piece. It brings it in almost immediately. And drumming does that. Like rhythm is one of the best things you could do for your brain.
Yeah.
But then we have the social element, and then we have the singing element. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that existed, so thanks for mentioning it.
I hope to see you there.
Yeah, I will be there. What about, I'm going to ask you one last thing. What about the power of awe? You hear that a lot now, and what do you think about that?
So this is one of the most well-researched things that we do. I love this area of research because it's deeply personal, It's deeply neurobiological, and it is this wonderful space. So this is the work of Dr. Keltner, UC Berkeley, a long time ago, who was a psychophysiologist, and it really started with looking at not only these disparate pieces of the brain being active, and like this is hearing and this is vision, but the human experience, right? The human experience of, it's like a loss of ego, right? And what do we do? What do we feel in these spaces where we lose ourselves completely, but we're also connected to something bigger? So they started studying what is happening neurobiologically. And everything that I just talked to you about the default mode network, about the amygdala, I didn't talk to you about the insula, but basically there's this combination areas in the brain, right? So usually on a daily basis, we're thinking about ourselves, which we have to, thinking of what I did yesterday, what am I doing right now, what am I doing in the future? We need these narratives, right, to plan our lives, but to also think about what we've been through. And then we have the insula, which is like, how do I feel? Do I feel okay? Am I flourishing right now? You know, am I living 1,000%? Nobody is, right? Am I living to, you know, or am I anxious? Am I doing okay, right? That's all the internal check-in. So when you get into an awe state, everything quiets, everything. There's no rumination, there's no default mode network. Oh, did I do that wrong? What do they think about me? What do you think they think about me? Like all that blah, blah, blah is gone. The interoception, the insula is quiet. And there's this sense of the smaller version is now connected to the bigger version. And it's this really beautiful state of just, I want to say almost like, okay, like of communing. Right? And most of the time people experience that by themselves. So if you think of, you know, you've done a hike and now you're on top of the mountain and you're looking at, you know, the sunset, right? Or you're at the ocean and you're, you know, by yourself, right? And there are different pieces to get there. I mean, there's
I'm feeling peaceful with you just talking about
see? And I think, I mean, from their research, they find that it's one of these states that is, it's like a temporary feeling of being sort of one with everybody, with everything. And it is that really nice loss of self, because all of the things that sort of jibber jabber all day are quiet. Literally, the neurobiology, if you look at the brain activity, it's quiet for once, right? So if you think of the brain as like a rodeo show and you're just like, how do I just corral all this? It's just quiet. You know, and so they study that. So there are ways of getting there. There are ways of training the brain to get there. Yeah, it's gorgeous. So we had one talk at the senior starter that was about awe and flourishing, and they're absolutely, the brain is so trainable. This is what I love about talking about neuroplasticity, is that it's so trainable and it loves to be trained. Brains love to be trained and to learn.
We don't give it enough credit.
Oh,
right.
Again, you know, the researchers who study that stuff, they say everything we know about the brain is a mile, could be a mile. We haven't even gone 3 inches.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
We know nothing, and that's humbling. I'd rather be in that 3 inches and be like, I don't know. I'd rather be there.
Right. Yeah, I guess we need to give our brains credit, and we need to give ourselves credit.
Absolutely, grace, just grace.
Yes,
you know?
Absolutely.
And the other piece is that our brains are doing everything to keep us alive, everything. So if you look at somebody and it looks like, oh, what are they doing? Like, what's wrong with them? No, their brain is doing everything to keep them alive. You know, we have to put that in context and say, whatever they're doing kept them alive at some point. So if it's not working right now, that's okay. You know, I think it's more facilitating and working out, how do we help them, you know, get out of what's not working anymore, maybe. And the same for ourselves. If this isn't working anymore, but it helped at one point, okay, let's see how we can help our brains that are already trying to help us. They're not trying to harm us, right?
So What's your one takeaway that you could offer to our viewers?
Which one?
I don't know. You got to pick one, or maybe more than one.
I think I'm still going to stick to research literacy, which is, there's a lot of instant expertise. There's a lot of social media and blogs and opinion pieces. But before, you go eat a lot of kimchi or a lot of, food, like, before you change your whole lifestyle, read what you're reading, have your podcast, but see who the author is. See what is their background, what is their training. I think with AI and with the amount of social media that we can listen to, attend to, there is a lot of misinformation. So I would just say, look up the author before you take on something, before you change your brain. What is their education? And it doesn't have to be a degree. What is their training? Who did they train with? How long did they train? I think a lot of, there's just a lot of information that says, like we said, like, here, you can do this for 3 weeks and your brain's going to change. No, it isn't. Neuroplasticity can change rapidly, but, behavior change, outwardly at least, takes about 21 days. Now, does the brain change with that? We don't exactly know. So I would just say just understand more about who the author is, what's their background, what's their training. Just dig a little bit deeper into who you think is an expert. And then also, even if somebody has an article, what is their background? A lot of people don't understand peer review. Peer review, to get an article published, sometimes takes years. Mm-hmm. Years. Mm. And that means somebody else looked at your article and they shredded it to pieces and they asked you all kinds of questions. And so we talk about evidence-based means you have to show the evidence. You have to say, I tested this in a lab setting, in a controlled setting. So that's what I mean about research literacy, is just kind of understanding what research is. Research is a very controlled process. So when we talk about fMRI, the brain knowledge that we know, that we trust, comes largely from fMRI, from FNIRS, from EEG, right? And you can't learn that from a blog. You cannot. You have to be, I can come in here and bring an EEG and I can show you your signals, and we could do a guided meditation and we could see your signals changing, right? So you have to have some of that in your background to be able to.
Yeah, I think in general it's hard for individuals to, right, because there's an overwhelming amount of information these days.
Yes.
It's constant, bombardment of information.
Yes.
So, even me, we talked earlier about, let's say you Google Cleveland Clinic, for example. You think that's a reliable source, but you still have to dig a little deeper. Yeah. You have to make sure the source is credible, and if there's associated research behind it.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that's important when you're trying to figure out things that will help you. But there are, simple things that, we've talked about that would really help. But you're talking about sort of these new concepts, or, should you eat mushrooms, and, how would that help?
Right.
I think my one takeaway is the word hope.
I love that.
Because you've given me hope today, and hopefully you've given others hope that your brain is not the static thing that you give up on. That you can continue to learn and grow, and how your brain actually wants you to do it, right? It's wanting you to feed it all of this good stuff, so that it can function better.
Absolutely.
That's the way I look at it. So you've given me a lot of how-tos and where I should start.
Nice.
And hope, and hopefully you've given hope to others.
I hope so. Yeah, 1,000%.
This has been fascinating. I really appreciate it. It's so wonderful to have such a local expert that we can, pull into the studio and say, hey, and you've really informed all of us. So I think
more than happy
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
It's a blast for me. I'm happy to be here with you. And we could talk for a few more hours.
We could. I mean, I'd love to have you back if you're interested.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we could go on and
on.
Yeah, we could go in depth on all sorts of stuff. Right, absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you again for coming.
My pleasure.
So that's it for today's show. Thank you for tuning in to Aging Boldfully. Thank you to my guest, Kymberlee O'Brien, for this really fascinating conversation about neuroplasticity. Hopefully it helps you. It certainly has helped me. And remember, aging is just a number. It's aging boldfully that makes life worth living. Have a great day.
This program was made possible by your Franklin friends and neighbors, good folks just like you. Thanks for supporting Franklin TV. And thanks for watching.